Thank you, everyone. So yes, my name is Eva Baylin, Director of the Graph Foundation. Have been working with the Graph for over 3 years now. And I'm here to tell you a little more about our story, going from centralized sort of software as a service to fully decentralized protocol. Sorry for this image not loading, but if you could see it, it would say protocol metrics at the top, subgraphs, smart contracts, and blockchains. And really, this is to show you what the use of a subgraph or the graph really is, and that's the intermediary layer between being able to access that blockchain data and being able to actually build things on blockchains like smart contracts. So you can imagine building an application on, let's say, the Uniswap smart contracts, and you can use the subgraph to feed that data to your application, and then build a really cool UI on top. And really, the point of the graph is to create a really easily accessible way to use data that's from the blockchain, whether that be to index it or query it. Maybe you want to do your own analysis and create new products and new insights in crypto. The graph is the foundation for all dApps in Web3. So whether you're building a DeFi application, NFTs, DAOs, we've heard it, we've named it. There have been dApps building with us, and so we really pride ourselves in having created a neutral standard, the subgraph, that really isn't specific or biased to any use case. So it really doesn't matter what you're building, which chain you're building on. You can use a subgraph to index that data and make it much easier for you to build UIs or applications on top. So starting with our journey, we launched in 2018 as a company in San Francisco. First, we launched the subgraph itself. This was a beta of the open API. Got a lot of traction, and it was very clear that there was something being solved here which hadn't been solved before, which is that getting data from blockchains was incredibly difficult at that time, whether you were building or just trying to analyze on-chain activity. And then we launched the Graph's hosted service. So really the initial hypothesis was the subgraph is solving a solution as a product, but before you decentralize, you really want to get that product market fit. You want to make sure people are actually using it. And so a centralized hosted service was launched to begin with. Since the hosted service launched, we've had over 35,000 subgraphs deployed globally, which is incredible. And I'll tell you a little more about where we're going. So the problem with the hosted service is there are lots of problems. Server downtime, latency, creating a permissioned ecosystem means that you limit the network effects of those open APIs and developers, central points of failure, sort of the classic reason we are decentralizing. And one really interesting one is slow integration. So when you have a hosted service or any centralized team, you're really depending on that team to whether it's improve or upgrade the software or maybe integrate with other subgraphs. And once you create networks, not only the graph, you create a world where any user can also contribute. So they can actually be the ones to submit PRs or upload subgraphs or even test them. So that's really the promise of decentralization, is you're not depending on one team or one piece of hardware. So we built a roadmap, to solve this problem. Like I said, we loved the subgraph. We think that was the basis that was necessary for querying data, but there was a journey that we needed to go on. So firstly, we found product market fit. The next, we are aligning the mission of decentralization. So this was with our users as well as our community. We bootstrapped the community. Created incentives in the network to actually make a network feasible, creating skin in the game, basically. Expanding core development, and then scaling out. And so I'm going to go through all of these because these are really the core to going from SaaS centralized to a protocol. So number one, product market fit. Like I said, subgraphs really were revolutionary at the time because there was no standard way of accessing blockchain data, let alone a way that was easy for other dApps to build on. So one of the most exciting things for me about subgraphs is how composable they are. So it really doesn't matter which blockchain you built on, your smart contracts. A subgraph is a neutral layer. So you might have built on Avalanche and you might have built on Solana, but a subgraph is a subgraph. And so any dApp that wants to maybe build on top of your smart contracts can just query those two subgraphs. And really, there is no distinction for them between the chains. And really, our goal is to have subgraphs be that data standard. We started with subgraphs, but it's possible the graph might also have different data sources in the future. But the subgraph itself is really the best index today for organizing data and building high-quality applications. Oh, no. There was a lovely image here about the graph. Mission alignment, so aligning our goals in the community around what it is that we're doing. Why is there a network and not just a hosted service? So the first and foremost is the network actually has better quality of service. We have now seen that the hosted service that is still run today is inferior to the decentralized network for Ethereum applications, which is no small feat. And really part of that is that we have hundreds of indexers, so hundreds of node operators, who are providing that redundancy, providing quality of service. They get to specialize in this. You know, a lot of them, this is their job that they've chosen to take on in Web3 is just to be an indexer. Whereas a centralized service always has to be stacking up, right? They're always increasing their server size or their hardware or their data center, whatever it might be. And there's always this issue of centralization and bloat. So creating that vision and mission alignment was really important for us to then go forward on, you know, what does this community look like? Who can actually be the ones to support all the services that a centralized service provides, but in a decentralized way. Oh no. I apologize, all my images are not loading. Awesome. So the road to network launch was in 2020, so this was the pandemic. We started with, first of all, hitting 1 billion queries on the hosted service. This was an incredible feat, but it pointed even more to the challenges that we were facing, where, again, our servers would get slow, so it was very clear we had to decentralize. We then launched a mission control testnet and a curator program, and I'll speak a bit more about this in the next slides. But those really were to align our community and teach them about what this really is, because the concept of a network, the concept of participating in data querying is really novel and brand new. So part of our journey is educating everyone. We then had the GRT public sale as well as security audits and eventually launched in December. At the time of launch, we also stood up the Graph Foundation and the Graph Council, which serve as the governance for the graph. So a common misconception is that the GRT token is a governance token when it is not. It is a staking token. And the governance that occurs in the graph is based on a council. So we are on a journey to decentralize further, but for the last 2 years, we've had a council of 10 individuals. They are based globally and in different functions. Some are indexers, some are developers, some are business people. And our goal is really to create that decentralized governance in a way that's meaningful and productive while decentralizing slowly. And then in 2021, we continue to expand. So a lot of product improvements to make accessing the network easier, such as the Graph Explorer, subgraph migration, and continuing to grow multi-blockchain. Oh. This is so unfortunate because these images are really beautiful. This image was highlighting the mission control testnet. So this was a testnet that we ran just before network launch. And one of the parts of bootstrapping community that people don't realize is really like taking everyone on the journey of education. So we had this testnet. It was incentivized for how much activity that those indexers and curators were providing during our testing period. But what it also created was a community of people who are really interested in owning a piece of the network. And that's something that you don't have in Web 2, where people don't care about the company you work for at all, unless they're a shareholder. People can care about networks, because if they can contribute, whether it's maybe a little bit of stake or a few hours working at a DAO, they really feel that ownership. So that's really critical to bootstrapping an initial community. And then moving forward, you want to make that community self-sustaining. So for example, participating in the Graph network might be where they start. Maybe they delegate and stake their tokens, and then maybe they become core contributors. Maybe they see, hey, I actually have skills that would be beneficial. Maybe I want to make designs. Maybe I want to do some marketing, or maybe I want to submit a PR issue. Then joining the DAOs. So we have 2 DAOs that have actually been set up in our ecosystem, the Advocates DAO and the Subgraph DAO. And we see a lot of folks get involved there as a way to get started in Web3 or the graph, and have seen a lot of folks actually get full-time hired from there. So really proving that this cycle works in helping people grow how much involvement they want to have in Web3 over time. And then lastly, grants. So whether it's a core developer grant or a grant just to build on the graph or maybe do some research, we are extremely open to that and encouraging. And I know a lot of other Web3 protocols are as well. More beautiful images gone. So this was going to show the network incentives. So there are 4 roles. I'm not sure if you can read this. There's the indexer role, which is the node operator. If it's okay, I think it's fine. Yeah. Indexers, which are the node operators, so they run the hardware. They're the ones doing that hard indexing work, and they earn query fees and indexing rewards for that work. So really, the value creation mechanism is those guys doing the work, indexing, syncing that data, and then dApps pay them for that work. Then you have curators, which act as signalers. And the goal of curators is, in a centralized company or a centralized context, you typically have a party that's telling you what is high quality, which API is high quality, which can you trust, and you don't have that in a decentralized context. So we have the concept of curators who can actually stake on subgraphs and tell indexers which subgraphs they should be indexing. And the idea is that, free market mechanisms work here. If you see a dApp that is using XYZ subgraph and it's very popular, you're going to signal on that subgraph because you can earn query fees from that. So it's very simple. You can, in theory, maybe try and fudge the network or the incentives, but really you as a curator are incentivized because you'll also earn as a result of that behavior. Delegators are the third role and what I'm personally most excited about, because people often assume that decentralized protocols require developers, and they do not. So you do not need to be a developer to participate. You can be a staker, it can be an NFT collector that simply understands the value that these networks bring. So delegators stake their GRT tokens on indexers. That way they don't need to run the node themselves, and that way they can also earn fees from the network. And by doing so, they also increase the security of the network. And the last role is the consumer themselves. So this is the dApp, the data UI, maybe the end user that's actually querying the subgraph, and they pay fees to the network. I don't know if you can see those numbers. So at the moment, we have 420 indexers, over 11,000 delegators, over 2,800 curators, and over 675 subgraphs have migrated to the network. So really incredible feat. We started from just about 100 indexers in our testnet to now being at 400. And we've seen the subgraph migration really pick up. So like I said, we started with a centralized hosted service. That's where we got our product market fit. And over the last year, we've been slowly having everyone migrate their subgraphs to the Graph network. And part of that journey is also the Graph network increasing its support for new chains. I know you guys, oh yeah, it works. Part of it is also increasing support for new chains. So right now the network supports Ethereum, Gnosis, and Polygon, and we're working on Optimism, Avalanche, and the other EVM chains very shortly. And at that point, we'll feel more comfortable having more dApps and subgraphs migrate. The next step was expanding core development. So one of the misconceptions, I would say, in crypto is that decentralization remains at the stack or the technical level, and that's just simply not true. And we've seen it time and time again that if there's a team or an investor that takes over too much of a protocol, that protocol can also deteriorate. So it was a really big priority for us to decentralize our development in our community. And we started with one team. That was Graph Protocol Inc. I was a part of that team as well. And then we expanded to 5 core dev teams plus a Graph Foundation. And we actually have Yuri here, CEO of the Guild, which is one of the teams, local team that's been focused on GraphQL development for several years. And really the goal here was we can't do everything as one team. Ethereum was not built by one team. It was started by, several folks, and now it's literally hundreds of thousands of individuals building on top of it. And that wouldn't have been possible. Ethereum wouldn't be where it is today without that. So we've really taken that to heart. All of our core developers focus on different aspects of, the stack. So for example, Edge and Node, which was the original core developer team, they focus more on Graph Node, some of the business development, while Semiotic AI is more focused on AI and simulation to make sure that the market itself is efficient within the graph. Teams like the Guild are focused on GraphQL development, creating a better tooling and interface for those users that are using subgraphs and substreams. Streaming Fast is a team working on high throughput, raw data extraction. So really trying to make it much easier, more efficient for use cases that seek balances, for example, for wallets or state data that isn't as ideal through a subgraph. And then we've got teams like Masari, kind of unique. They are one of our core subgraph developers. They don't focus on the protocol directly, but they're focusing on building hundreds of very high quality subgraphs that are standardized. So one thing we noticed working with Masari is that different projects use different nomenclature and syntax for their variables, which can actually be very problematic. I see someone nodding. So for example, Ave might call TVL something very different than compound. And that makes it very challenging then for a DeFi aggregator or a lending aggregator to build on top of them. So Masari has been focusing on working on standards to make it easier for dApps and developers to build on top of subgraphs. So one of the things they developed, I think about 6 months ago, was this standardized TVL definition. And they open sourced it, it's on GitHub, and that way it could be a collaborative process that everyone comes to. What is that standard definition of TVL? What does that literally look like at the subgraph level? We then also expanded to different working groups. So what we noticed pretty quickly was the graph is not linear, it's not single focused. And so we've got 5 different working groups that focus on different areas. Data and APIs is on the subgraph itself, graph node, improving that data extraction process. Indexer experience is improving the tooling and interaction for indexers themselves, so making it more efficient for them to actually earn queries or set up their infrastructure. Protocol network operations is things like the smart contracts themselves. And SnarkForce and protocol economics are more on the research side. So we have a team that's actually focused on cryptography to create a verifiable way to know if your data is accurate. So for example, being able to use zero-knowledge proofs to be able to attest that the indexer had actually given you the correct query or given you a false query. So we're really excited about a lot of the work that has been happening this week related to that too. And protocol economics. So obviously the most interesting is constant iteration and evolution of your protocol. We saw that with Ethereum with the launch of proof of stake, that being evolutionary and willing to change is actually incredibly important to your protocol. And so we experienced that as well. I actually have a link down here. If you want to get involved in the research side of the graph, you can take a look there. That's where you can see all the proposals related to protocol economics, improvements to the graph network, and everyone's really open to new ideas. Scaling out. So this is obviously the most important step, which is actually growing the network. And we've had over 600 subgraphs migrate from the hosted service to the network, which is really incredible over the last 6 months. What's even more exciting is to see the dApps actually start to prioritize this more, especially since a lot more of the regulatory scrutiny has occurred. But teams like SushiSwap, Radical, ArtBlocks, they really care about ensuring that their dApps can exist and are unstoppable. And the alternative to using the graph is perhaps your dApp might go down, or maybe there's increased latency, or maybe even there's a censorship issue, as we've seen with Tornado Cash. So it's incredibly important for networks like the Graph, Arweave, Chainlink, et cetera, to exist to create the means that applications can be truly decentralized. That if there was a party that tried to hack or take down the application, that would be nearly impossible, because for the Graph, for example, there would always be at least one indexer that would be willing to serve those queries. Scaling out also means persistent growth. So here's a chart from Masari just showing some of the development that we've had. And one of the things we've learned between the migration is teams actually making their subgraphs and data infrastructure much more efficient. So whereas a team might have deployed 5 subgraphs on the hosted service, they've come to us or the subgraph DAO, worked with them, and maybe they're deploying 2 subgraphs now. So a lot of this shows that teams really care about the efficiency and creating lean infrastructure, not taking on too much technical debt. And then persistent growth in network fees. So, value creation occurs in decentralized networks. It's really important as well for sustainability. And we've continued to grow. So as the number of subgraphs migrate, as the bear market recovers, as we see more applications being built, the fees go up. And, in history, I've actually really enjoyed seeing the graph as a proxy for Ethereum development, because when Ethereum development is high or when adoption is high, queries go up. When adoption is low, queries go down. So it's been cool to see, the data of the graph network usage actually as a proxy for what's going on in the space. To me, this says not only are more subgraphs migrating and decentralizing, but there's probably more activity on those applications than maybe there was 3 months ago. Scaling out also means decentralizing your community and governance. So, like I said, we launched with a Graph Council and the Graph Foundation, but we spent the last 2 years expanding who should be part of that decision-making process. So we launched the Graph Advocates DAO about a year ago. This was launched by the community with the goal of the community running the community. The Graph Foundation had, taken over all the community grants, anything from marketing to hackathons to design, and we felt it was time to really let the community own that, as they know what's best for them. So over the last year, that Advocates DAO has grown to over 45 voting members. I think there's over 200 advocates now. And really an advocate can be anyone who wants to contribute in any way you desire. And again, going back to that cycle, really our goal is to create a space that you can start off fresh, maybe knowing nothing at all in Web3, join the Graph ecosystem and use that as a vehicle to get much more involved, whether it's full-time or just learning more. So for example, in our Advocates DAO, we have these 6 informal roles, and the goal is that people apply to be an advocate, similar to an ambassador program. Maybe you want to attend a few hackathons and maybe provide a subgraph workshop, and maybe from there, Misari has a job opening and maybe you're suitable. And so really creating that space for a decentralized ecosystem to flourish, because that's how you also decentralize the tech, is really starting with the people. Lessons learned. So I wanted to go through some things that we've learned over the last 2 years that I wouldn't have expected, having been here this long. So first of all, product market fit must come before decentralization. This was the path that the Graph chose, having launched a centralized product first. And really, I think that is a testament to just any technological innovation. You really want to make sure that there's developers or users that want to use your product before you bring in sort of the philosophical or maybe luxury aspect of its offering. It takes longer to build a community than you think. I would have thought that we could have launched the Advocates DAO maybe even a few months after network launch, but it took about 1.5 years for the community to really come together and feel empowered. And I think that's just a general fallacy. We often underestimate how long it takes to change human behavior or to teach people. Like I said, education is key. So even throughout our testnet and our curator program, we had a lot of documentation and materials that actually taught people what Web3 was. A lot of people are coming in having not understood, what a decentralized database is or why we're even here. So a lot of our jobs are not only to show our projects, but also to teach people about why it's important to be here. Carefully designing incentives. So one of the things that we're seeing is you really have to be iterating on what your community desires. So we've had a few examples of governance proposals where the indexers got really vocal about something they were uncomfortable with. And it was one of those things where the core developers, had they not received that feedback, would have proceeded with that decision. But the indexers felt strongly it would make them suffer, or it might not harden the incentives they need. So really being careful and attentive is critical. And it's one of those things that's harder in a decentralized ecosystem because you don't have a company or a headquarters. When people ask, where's the Graph headquartered, I say nowhere, the internet. And so that makes it a bit more challenging for people to figure out what is the ecosystem and how to make it grow. But the point of everything here, and we've seen that with Ethereum, is that you can actually coordinate in a decentralized manner globally. We can all speak different languages, but be united by the incentives of Ethereum. So that's really important when you're building out a protocol. Decentralization isn't always a priority until it is. So I'm sure you've heard this before, DApp saying, I don't have time for decentralization, I don't have money, whatever it might be. Teams like The Graph and Arweave make it fairly easy for you to do that because you don't have to run your own hardware, you don't have to write any proprietary code. But we find most dApps, if not all of them, come around to figuring out why they need decentralization. And if they didn't prioritize it yesterday, they do tomorrow for a plethora of reasons. We've obviously seen a lot of the Tornado Cash rhetoric be influential, but I would say that's an extreme case, right? You don't want OFAC and the regulatory organizations coming after you to be the reason you decentralize. There's a lot of very simple reasons to decentralize, simply like maintaining uptime, where you have applications like a Twitter or Amazon that go down all the time. The point of a network is that you're relying on hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals to keep your application running. A decentralized ecosystem needs decentralized contributors. So this was really the point that I think we are champions of, which is like you really can't have a decentralized protocol without people also being decentralized. Part of it is a diverse set of thinking, part of it is just having diverse expertise. Like I said, I don't think we would be here today if the Graph was still one core developer team. We really require the expertise from others. And enabling others to feel empowered. So creating that cycle where people can re-enter the ecosystem. We've seen that happen with Ethereum. DevCon is one of those catalysts that every DevCon, there's probably hundreds of, or if not thousands of people who are brand new learning about Ethereum, as I'm sure there are here, and really making sure that opportunity is sustainable. Don't underestimate your network participants. We often think about them as perhaps anonymous or non-participatory, but we've seen the opposite. We've seen quite a few people and teams that want to make a name for themselves as a top indexer or a top curator and actually take that reputation into other areas of Web3. So one example is members of our subgraph DAO started to reach out to other teams in Web3, actually just improving their documentation and submitting PRs. So right now, if you go onto the ENS website or the SushiSwap's website and you see subgraph documentation, that was actually just members of the community who decided they thought ENS needed better documentation or SushiSwap needed better documentation coming from the experts of the graph. And so that's really exciting. That's not led by the foundation or any core developer. I actually just learned about that about a month ago. But it's an opportunity that, people who are outside of the core development also are thinking about your protocol. They're thinking about how to improve it. And so you don't want to underestimate what they can do. Decentralization takes longer than you think. Do I have another minute? I think this is obvious. There's a lot of hurdles, whether it's technological or social. And the last thing I want to say is, we think about Ethereum and crypto and blockchains as tech problems, and they are, but they're often not. And it's a lot more about us actually paving the way for people to then find how they can contribute, find, which node they are comfortable running, what mission do they align with. And I think the future is us actually being able to participate in our systems, not just consume them. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you so much. I love your passion and just the way you deliver things. Thank you so much. It contagious.